First of all, thank you to Medical Education Forum 2022 for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. This is the last session of the morning, or the last talk of the morning session. So one more session, or one more talk to listen to. And I know I have a very long title. My apologies for that. I think what I will say won't be that complex. So I have a... The thing I want to say is really straightforward. I'm interested in the type of methodology that makes use of the smartphones that were mentioned, that students carry around to understand learning activities, maybe in a better or different way than the typical methods that we're using today, and how they might be of an advantage. Let's see if I can use this. Yes, it seems to work. I have nothing to disclose. And now that I start talking about this, I'd like to say point at two important things or ideas as a starting point. The first one is I like to view myself as a medical educator and a researcher in medical education research as a designer. We design things in medical education. We not only want to convey knowledge or support our students, nor do we just want to understand what is out there. We almost always want to change things. We want to improve things and refine them and adjust them. And to do that, you have to understand the mechanisms that are taking place, the learning activities, the details of that. And relating to that, the other thing I want to point at is that thinking, cognition, and learning and all these mental activities are fundamentally situated socially and physically. And that's repeated quite often so that it almost becomes a platitude or a cliche. But for me, that is really fundamental, and it's important for what I'm about to say. So what I want to talk about are these methods to collect data, which are inspired by diary writing. The diaries that we all wrote in as kids, and most of us stopped doing that. But the idea is that we ask the participants or the students to assess not the day that passed, but one activity or situation at a time. And to do that over a period of time. And then that task is not for them, but for whoever collects the data, the researcher or the teacher, to try to generalize over the observations to see what's happening over time. Is there maybe a trend or a pattern of some kind? This is sometimes called experience sampling, and the basic idea is then to collect these self-reports on experiences or emotions or thoughts related to these activities or experiences, or sometimes other elements that take place in everyday life. And usually you send out a questionnaire with some kind of reminder, maybe a beep or a text message or, at certain intervals of time. And the advantage is that you get an insight into the everyday life of the participants. As you collect data in the naturalistic environment, validity hopefully goes up and you avoid some memory biases that might take place otherwise. There are many names for this. One umbrella term is intensive longitudinal methods. Some methods focus more on subjective experiences, like the first one. Others may include more physiological measures, like the second one, and maybe ambulatory assessment. And then yet others focus more on the activities themselves, like contextual activity sampling. Some use more advanced technology than others. Others use just paper and pen. And maybe the last one focuses on how you spend your time over day. But the basic idea is similar in all these methods. And of course, this is not new. Already 100 years ago, or even more, Bevans made a study about how working men spent the free time that they were getting more and more of thanks to technology. He was a sociologist and interested in how are they using their leisure time when they leave work. So the participants filled in these paper forms, ticking every day what they were doing after work. And one observation was that people were going to the motion pictures, which was new at that time. So that came out of that. And of course, today we have all sorts of devices and technologies to support us and to do this in a better way than to fill in a paper form at the end of the day. You can carry them around. We've had different types of technologies for the past decades which started to boost these methods. As we can carry them around, this even more adds to the reliability or validity of these methods, because you can do the assessments closer to the events that you're interested in. And now we can easily collect all sorts of data. It can be qualitative or quantitative, text, pictures, video, of course, as you wish. And we have a large number of different apps that can be downloaded to support studies like this. Some are entirely free, some you can try for free, and some cost money. They have may have slightly different focus, but again, the basic idea is the same, to support this longitudinal collection of observations from your participants. So this is a background. I'd like to share you some observations from a couple of studies that we've done. One is done at an interprofessional clinical training ward. What is that? That is a ward run entirely by students. It's an orthopedic ward where different student categories, as part of a course, spend 2 weeks at these wards and take care of the patients who are real. It's a very popular ward, actually. We were interested in the learning activities and experiences of these students during these 2 weeks, what they were doing. And how would you normally study this? Well, you hand out a questionnaire at the end, ask about it, or you talk to them and do interviews. We did both of these. The main idea is when you do this afterwards is that the students remember the events that they went through, and then they give you a nuanced generalization of what took place during the 2 weeks, and they share that with you. We have added experience sampling to this, and let the students 5 times a day, every day at the ward, answer a number of questions. It was the same questions every time, so it went pretty fast. It took a couple of minutes to fill in our questionnaires, and it was something like this. They would tell us which clinical activity are they engaged in right now or right before, and then they'd rate a number of quantitative measures about their experiences, their feelings, stress, competence, challenge, and things like that. And then if they wanted, they could comment on and give a reflection about what they were doing. It went pretty fast, so it wasn't too difficult and didn't disturb them too much. As an example, you could get nice data like this showing what were the stress levels over a period of time. That's just an example. Here's another one. We could connect different types of emotions connected to different clinical activities for each individual and over time. But I'm not going to dig into these details. I'd like to point at an overall pattern that we were seeing in these studies. And it could look something like this. These are comments made during the clinical, this course at this ward. They would say things that they don't understand what's going on, collaboration doesn't work, they were stressed, they felt that they needed help, and they were even questioning the activities and the course. They felt they had a lack of knowledge, and they needed more help and supervision and support from tutors. So we were very interested in them to know what are they going to tell us afterwards in the retrospective interviews right after the 2 weeks. How would they talk about this? And interestingly, in unison, they would pretty much agree on all went just fine. There were no problems. It was just great. We collaborated well. There were no problems at all. And we were a bit confused by this, and we looked at what the different individuals were saying. So I'll give you some examples of that. One person, participant, one student would say, complain about the teamwork during the course and say there's no structure, it was disturbing. The same student afterwards say, the division of tasks worked in a natural way, there was a nice atmosphere in the team. Another student was anxious and nervous, didn't know what was going to happen and how to manage tasks. And the same student afterwards would say, the level and challenge was just right for us. Third example, in the clinical context, the student would say, collaboration with a tutor doesn't work. Afterwards, the same student says the collaboration has worked out well, not mentioning what was said during the time at the ward. So clearly, the generalization that the students made in the interviews was at least not what it was true, but it wasn't precise, and at least it wasn't full, giving us the full picture of what took place. This is the other example, another study. This was done in a similar way, and at 20 different nursing homes where all nursing students in Stockholm in Sweden need to take part in clinical placements, and they go to these different nursing homes in the first and the final year of their training. So we were following them at 20 different nursing homes, asking them to fill in these types of questions several times a day during these 5-week periods. We got very interesting data. This is an example. Again, the blue lines showing how they felt more and more competent during the placements. The red lines, which were a bit more stable, showed that they were stably challenged. The first-year students were more challenged than the final-year students. Another example of the type of data we get was that different clinical activities could be associated with different experiences or feeling. Some were associated with boredom, others with anxiety, and yet others with feeling of flow when everything was just right. But these were details. Again, I want to point at a general trend that we were seeing here, which was, and now I'm going backwards, here is what the final year students were saying in the retrospective interviews, in the interviews right after these 5 weeks. They all agreed. I think there was no exception among the final year students that they didn't think the placements were challenging at all. They were completely understimulating. It was too easy. They knew everything already, and there was no problem. However, when we went back and looked at what were they saying during the placements, well, they had reported to us that they had difficult conversations with relatives, didn't know what to say. They have difficulties managing patients who wouldn't take their medication, and they had other difficulties finding the right medications. This sounds very difficult. One patient was dying. How do they talk to the relatives of that patient? They were nervous about the health of their patients. They had ethical difficulties were pointed out, difficulties communicating with the patient. They had difficulties with clinical procedures. So these are the same students, again, saying one thing during the placements and something that seems to be almost contradictory afterwards. How is this possible? Well, there are several possible explanations to this, and one is motivation. Once you pass this course or done this placement, you're not as motivated to talk about the problem you had 3 weeks ago on Tuesday afternoon, or it was bad, but I got through it. I've done the course. I succeeded. Everyone else should do the same course as well. It's good for them. So why talk about it now? So they're forward-looking, like everyone is. You're more interested in what is about to happen, and when it's important to you is during the course, not afterwards. That's one thing. The other is social desirability bias. Maybe looks more favorable, they think, if they, on the one hand, don't complain about details they had 3 weeks ago. It's why bring that up now? It was all fine. Or if you're a final year student, maybe there's an idea that it looks better if they said it was really easy. I already know this stuff. They're growing into this professional role. This placement is good for first year students, not for final year students like me. There could be an element of that. There surely is a recall memory bias here. You can't remember what happened 2 weeks ago at 1:15, but we can see what they were saying. They can't remember that. So you can only remember the significant events that took place, but you can't remember all the events that took place. You can't even remember all the reports that you sent to us. There's so many. And a final possible explanation is that you change your views. What was a huge problem at the time, a couple of weeks ago, you had a conflict, a challenge, a problem that you were struggling with. Maybe you resolved it, maybe you agreed on something. It's no longer a problem, so why even bring it up? It's in the past. You change your view about it, realize you were wrong or something. So that's also possible. So then, which type of methodology brings you the most truthful result? If you use this big word with a capital T, which is better? Well, of course, this depends. What they're saying after courses, after an intervention, after a placement, is true to them. They feel this way, and it's probably that view they have that is their lasting view, that they will continue to say afterwards. But on the other hand, what they were saying during the placement or at the ward was true at that point. And as educators and as researchers, maybe we need to look more at those details if we want to improve and design our educational interventions. So, am I saying that we shouldn't listen to the students? Well, maybe sort of, but if we listen to them only after an intervention has taken place, we need to take what they're saying with a fistful of salt and realize there may be other views, even from themselves, if they were asked earlier. Because in medical education, we tend to focus on the outcomes, different levels of outcomes, the results of what we're doing. And I think we talk often too little about the processes themselves and the details of that activities taking place and the learning activities themselves. To conclude, what seems to be the case here in many of these studies that we're doing is that what students say during the courses and the placements or any intervention like that may supplement and sometimes even contradict what they're saying afterwards. And vice versa, of course. I haven't talked about that, but that's another discussion. And experience sampling methods like these, they can help you capture important details that would be difficult, sometimes I think impossible to capture only using these conventional retrospective methods like running a survey or asking people afterwards. What's the take-home message of this? Well, maybe you should not postpone the evaluation to afterwards. And I realize if you're a clinical teacher or a medical educator, doing an experience sampling study is very time-consuming. You need resources for it, and you need to involve the participants, which is not always easy, although they afterwards typically will say that they learned from it and they thought there were some benefits to it. Maybe they weren't saying that when they were doing it, I don't know. But maybe there are some compromises. Rather than just asking afterwards, you could do something in between. At least ask the participants, the students, one time or a few times during the intervention, whatever kind of interventions you're involved in. That's it. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. There are questions, so you're not free to go yet. People struggle with extremely low responses at post-course evaluations. Do you think we can get better response rates with this methodology?
Well, I have to confess that that is a huge challenge for these studies as well. However, I often get comments from people who have participated. I was touching upon that they think it was beneficial. These questions make them reflect on what they're doing and talk about these things, so they feel that it's advantageous for them. But it is difficult to, especially if the students are, feel they have, like most students feel they have a lot to think about anyway, they have to learn stuff, the courses take time, and I'm adding something to it. That could be difficult. So, but there are mechanisms to try to engage them and encourage them in a different way. You simply by thanking and encouraging whenever they do send any reports with their phones. And ultimately, you could even I'd not like to use the word bribe, but you can have maybe rewards at the end for those who have participated. And that doesn't have to.
Student engagement and reflection seem to be very obvious benefits of your method, which I love a lot. But there is one more thing which brings even more challenges. Do you think we could use it to tailor the experience, like raise the bar when they have a perception of not enough challenge, or support them when they write, okay, we are lost, we don't know what to do?
Yeah, that's of course very interesting if we could do that. That would put even more burden on the people running this type of study. But I think, on the other hand, if you know that the students are sending in reports about what they're doing, and you're a teacher, you'll be very interested in knowing what are they saying right now. And so maybe, and even with these apps developing, it will become more and more easy to compile what they're saying in a good way. So you could start doing exactly what you're pointing at. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.